My name is Ramon, and at 67 years old, I thought I understood what grief was until I lost Eleanor to cancer 6 months ago. 40 years of marriage ended, leaving me alone in our too-quiet house. But nothing prepared me for what my only son, Thomas, would do next. The phone call came on a Tuesday, his voice casual, almost smug. "Dad, I sold your car. You can take the bus to work now." He had no idea what was hidden in that glove box. No idea at all. If you know what it feels like to be betrayed by family while you are still grieving, please drop a like and subscribe. Let me know where you are watching from, and stick around to see how I handled what happened next. Eleanor and I met in college back in 1976. I was studying engineering, and she was pursuing art history. We bumped into each other at the campus library, quite literally. I knocked over her stack of books and spent 15 minutes helping her reorganize them. By the time we finished, I had worked up the courage to ask her out for coffee. That coffee date turned into dinner the following weekend, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. We married young, just 22, against the advice of our parents who thought we should establish our careers first. But when you know, you know. And I knew Eleanor was my forever. We moved into a tiny apartment near my first job as a junior engineer at a manufacturing firm. Eleanor worked at the local museum while finishing her degree. Those early years were lean but happy. We saved every penny for a down payment on our first house, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood in Portland. It was there that Thomas was born in 1982. Eleanor decided to stay home with him for the first few years, then returned to work part-time at the museum when he started school. As my career advanced, we could have moved to a bigger house, but we loved our neighborhood and the memories we had created there. Instead, we renovated, adding a sunroom where Eleanor could paint and a proper workshop for me in the garage. That workshop is where I spent 5 years restoring a 1967 Ford Mustang, a project Eleanor encouraged even though it meant countless weekends of me covered in grease and our garage in disarray. The Mustang. That car meant everything to us. I found it in terrible condition at a junkyard, but Eleanor saw my excitement and simply said, "Bring it home, Ramon." So I did. She would bring me sandwiches and cold beer while I worked on it, sometimes sitting on an old stool just to keep me company. When I finally got it running, the look of pride on her face meant more than any engineering achievement in my career. Once restored, that candy apple red beauty became our weekend escape vehicle. We took it on coastal drives, to wine country, and on camping trips. Thomas learned to drive in that car. Eleanor and I celebrated our 30th anniversary with a 2-week road trip through the Pacific Northwest in that Mustang. The car was more than metal and engine parts. It was a time capsule of our life together. Thomas, our only child, grew up with advantages Eleanor and I never had. We paid for private school when the local public options declined in quality. We funded his college education in full so he could graduate without student loans. We helped with the down payment on his first condo. Perhaps we gave him too much, because somewhere along the way, Thomas developed a sense of entitlement that worried us both. After college, Thomas bounced between jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a year or two. He had grand ideas for businesses but lacked the work ethic to see them through. By his mid-30s, he had launched and failed at 3 different startups, each time coming to us for money to cover his debts. Eleanor always wanted to help him, and I usually gave in, though I tried to structure it as loans with repayment plans. Thomas rarely stuck to those plans. What we did not know until much later was that Thomas had developed a gambling problem. It started with poker games with friends, then sports betting, and eventually, casino gambling. He kept it hidden from us, explaining away his financial troubles as business investments gone wrong or unexpected expenses. 2 years ago, Eleanor was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. The prognosis was poor from the start, but my Eleanor was a fighter. She underwent chemotherapy, radiation, and 2 surgeries. I took a leave of absence from work to be her full-time caregiver. Those 2 years were the hardest of my life, watching the vibrant, creative woman I loved fade a little more each day. Thomas visited sporadically during her illness, always with excuses about work commitments or being too busy. When he did visit, he would often bring up his latest financial difficulties within the first hour, sometimes asking Eleanor directly for money when I stepped out of the room. It broke my heart to see her worry about him when she should have been focusing on her health. In her final weeks, when hospice care began, Eleanor made me promise something. "Help Thomas become the man I know he can be," she whispered one night. "Not by giving him everything he wants, but by giving him what he needs." I promised her I would try, though I had no idea how difficult that promise would be to keep. After 40 years together, I lost my Eleanor on a rainy April morning. She passed peacefully in our home, holding my hand. Thomas arrived 2 hours after she was gone, full of excuses about traffic. I was too numb with grief to be angry then. The funeral was small, just as Eleanor wanted. Thomas seemed impatient throughout, checking his phone repeatedly. He left immediately after the service, claiming an important business meeting couldn't wait. I returned to our empty house alone. The following weeks passed in a fog of paperwork, well-meaning casseroles from neighbors, and sleepless nights. I returned to work part-time, 3 days a week, finding that the routine gave me some small comfort. The Mustang sat in the garage. I could not bring myself to drive it yet, but I would sometimes sit in the driver's seat, surrounded by memories of Eleanor. It was the closest thing to having her with me again. 6 weeks after Eleanor's funeral, I returned to work part-time. My colleagues were supportive, offering condolences and giving me space when I needed it. Engineering had always been my sanctuary, a place where problems had logical solutions, unlike the messy, unsolvable problem of grief. That Tuesday, I had spent the morning reviewing plans for a new municipal project. The familiar work had provided a few hours of respite from my sorrow. I caught the bus home, still not ready to drive Eleanor's Subaru, which now sat beside the empty space where the Mustang should have been. The Mustang remained in the garage, covered with a tarp. I had not driven it since before Eleanor's diagnosis. Somehow, taking it out without her felt wrong. When I walked into the house, the phone was ringing. Seeing Thomas's name on the caller ID gave me a moment of warmth. Perhaps he was finally checking in on me. "Dad," he said without preamble when I answered. "I sold your car." I thought I had misheard him. "You what?" "The Mustang. I sold it yesterday. Got $25,000 for it, which is pretty good considering how old it is." The room seemed to tilt around me. I lowered myself into a kitchen chair. "Thomas, what are you talking about? You cannot sell my car. You do not have the right." He sighed, the sound of a man dealing with someone being unreasonable. "Look, Dad, you are not driving it anyway. It is just sitting there. And let's face it, you are too old to be driving a car like that now. You could hurt yourself or someone else." "I am 67, not 97, I said, my voice rising. "And that car belongs to me. It is mine to decide what happens to it." "Well, it is done now," Thomas said dismissively. "I used the spare key from Mom's key drawer and took care of the paperwork. The new owner already picked it up while you were at work. I figured it would be easier this way. No long goodbyes." The betrayal hit me in waves. My son had taken my property, forged my signature, and sold a piece of my history with Eleanor without even consulting me. "Where is the money?" I asked, suddenly suspicious. "I am investing it," he replied smoothly. "In my new business venture. It is what Mom would have wanted. She always supported my entrepreneurial spirit." My blood boiled at his invocation of Eleanor. "Do not tell me what your mother would have wanted. She would never have wanted you to steal from me." "It is not stealing," Thomas countered. "It is helping you move on. Plus, now you do not have to worry about maintenance or insurance. The bus system is good in Portland. You can take that to work like you did today." The casual cruelty of his suggestion that I, at my age, should give up my independence and rely solely on public transportation stunned me into momentary silence. Then, a terrible realization hit me. "Thomas, there was something in the glove box. Something important." "What, the registration?" "I took care of that." "No," I said, my voice breaking. "Something your mother gave me before she died. Something irreplaceable." There was a pause on the line. "Well, "I did not check the glove box," he finally said, his tone suggesting he did not believe me or care. "If it was so important, you should have kept it in the house." I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of anger and loss. "Who did you sell it to? I need to contact them." "Dad, you need to let this go. The car is gone. Whatever was in there is gone. It is time to move forward, not keep clinging to the past." "Thomas, this is not about clinging to the past. That car was special to your mother and me. We restored it together. We took family vacations in it. You learned to drive in that car." "It is just a car, Dad," he interrupted. "Just metal and rubber. Not worth getting upset over. Look, I have another call coming in about the business. We will talk later." Before I could respond, he had hung up. I sat at the kitchen table, the phone still in my hand, feeling as if I had been physically struck. The Mustang was gone, and with it, the precious items Eleanor had entrusted to me to place in the glove box. I spent that night pacing the house, unable to sleep. How could my own son betray me this way? Had Eleanor and I failed so completely as parents that he could steal from me while I was still grieving his mother? And what about the items in the glove box? My heart ached thinking about losing them forever. I called Thomas repeatedly throughout the evening, but he did not answer. I left increasingly desperate voicemails, explaining about the glove box contents, begging him to tell me who had bought the car. By midnight, I realized he was deliberately ignoring me. As I sat in Eleanor's reading chair, watching the rain against the windows, I thought about the son we had raised. Thomas had always been headstrong, even as a child. Eleanor had a soft spot for him, often excusing behavior I thought should be corrected. "He has such big dreams," she would say. "He feels everything so intensely." I wondered now if our different parenting approaches had somehow led to this moment, with Thomas believing he had the right to sell my property and dismiss my feelings. The loss of the Mustang felt like losing a piece of Eleanor all over again. It had been our project, our escape vehicle, our memory maker, and now it was gone, sold without my consent by our son who seemed to have no understanding of its value beyond the dollar amount it could bring. But even worse than losing the car was the thought of what had been stored in its glove box. Items so precious that their loss made my knees weak and my chest tight. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would not let Thomas's betrayal be the final word. I would find the Mustang and what it contained, with or without my son's help. 2 weeks before Eleanor died, when we both knew the end was coming soon, she asked me to drive her to the jeweler's downtown. It was a good day for her, one where the pain medication worked well enough that she could get out of the house. I was hesitant, worried about tiring her out, but she insisted with a determination I had not seen in months. "I have something I need to do, Ramon," she said, her blue eyes still bright despite the pallor of her skin. "Something important." I could never deny her anything, so I helped her into the car and drove carefully through the spring streets of Portland, blooming with cherry blossoms that Eleanor admired through the window. The jeweler, Mr. Abernathy, was expecting us. He showed us into his private consultation room and brought out a small velvet box. "It is exactly as we discussed, Mrs. Wells," he said gently to Eleanor. "I hope it brings comfort." Eleanor opened the box and smiled, her thin fingers trembling slightly as she lifted out a gold locket on a delicate chain. It was oval-shaped, with intricate engravings of forget-me-nots, Eleanor's favorite flower, on the front. "Open it," she said, handing it to me. Inside was a tiny version of our wedding photo, the two of us so young and full of hope, my arm around her waist, her head thrown back in laughter at something I had whispered in her ear. On the opposite side of the locket was a small compartment. "There is a note inside," Eleanor explained. "But do not read it yet. When I am gone, and when you are ready, that is when you should read it, not before." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "Put it in the Mustang's glove box," she continued. "Remember how we always used to leave notes for each other there during our road trips? This will be my last note to you, but promise me you will not read it until you are ready." "I promise," I managed to say. "But why the glove box? Would not it be safer in the house?" Eleanor's smile was gentle. Because the Mustang is where we were happiest, all those open roads, all that freedom and adventure. When you are ready to read my note, it should be in a place that reminds you of joy, not sickness and hospitals. So that evening, I placed the locket in the Mustang's glove box. I did not know then that I would not be emotionally ready to read Eleanor's final message for months. I was not strong enough yet to face whatever goodbye she had written. But the locket was not the only important item in that glove box. Also inside were the original ownership papers for the Mustang. Eleanor and I had purchased the car together, but the title was in her name for insurance purposes. After her death, I had not yet transferred it into my name, another task I had not been emotionally ready to face. Additionally, there was a folder containing documentation for Eleanor's jewelry collection. Many pieces had been passed down from her grandmother and mother, family heirlooms with significant monetary and sentimental value. Eleanor had created detailed records of each piece, its history, and appraisal value, to ensure they would be properly handled after her death and eventually passed to future generations. Perhaps most irreplaceable was a USB drive containing video messages Eleanor had recorded during her final months. Messages for future events she knew she would miss. Thomas's wedding, if he ever settled down. The birth of grandchildren we now might never have. My 70th birthday. Our anniversary dates. She had spent precious energy during her final days creating these messages, her way of being present even when she was gone. All of these treasures, these final connections to the woman I had loved for 40 years, were now in the hands of a stranger because of my son's unconscionable actions. The thought of never recovering them, particularly Eleanor's final written words to me, was unbearable. As morning light filled our bedroom, I made a decision. Thomas had refused to help me, so I would find the Mustang myself. I would track down whoever had purchased it and explain the situation. Surely, any decent person would understand the importance of what that glove box contained. I showered and dressed with a sense of purpose I had not felt since Eleanor's diagnosis. The fog of grief that had surrounded me for months seemed to lift slightly, burned away by the heat of determination and, yes, anger. Anger at Thomas for his betrayal, anger at myself for not being more careful with Eleanor's precious gifts, even a flash of irrational anger at Eleanor for suggesting the glove box as a hiding place. But beneath the anger was love, and it was love that would drive my search. Love for Eleanor and the 40 years we had shared. Love for the memories contained in that car and its glove box. Even love for Thomas, though at that moment it was buried beneath layers of hurt and betrayal. I stood in the empty garage, looking at the space where the Mustang had been parked for decades. "I will find it, Eleanor," I promised aloud. "I will find your last message to me." With renewed determination, I went inside to make a list of everyone who might know something about classic car sales in the Portland area. As an engineer, I approached problems methodically. This would be no different. Somewhere out there was our Mustang, and with it, the last words Eleanor had written for me. I would not rest until I found them. That morning, I created a detailed plan to find the Mustang. As an engineer for over 4 decades, I approached problems systematically, breaking them down into manageable parts. First, I needed to identify potential buyers of classic cars in the Portland area. Then I would need to determine which of them might have purchased a 1967 candy apple red Ford Mustang in the past 48 hours. I began with local dealerships that specialized in vintage vehicles. There were 3 within the city limits. I called each one, explaining that my car had been sold without my permission and that I needed to locate it urgently. The first 2 expressed sympathy but said they had not recently acquired such a vehicle. The third, Classic Wheels on Burnside, seemed hesitant. "We may have had a Mustang come through yesterday," the manager said cautiously, "but I cannot share details about our transactions, sir." I drove to Classic Wheels immediately, taking Eleanor's Subaru for the first time since her death. The familiar scent of her perfume still lingered in the fabric of the passenger seat, bringing a wave of grief that I pushed aside. I needed to focus. At the dealership, I spoke with the manager in person. showing him photos of the Mustang and explaining about the items in the glove box. "Look, I am not trying to reverse the sale," I explained. "My son sold it without my permission, but what I really need are the personal items inside. They are irreplaceable mementos from my late wife." The manager's professional demeanor softened. "I am sorry for your loss, sir, and I am sorry about your situation, but that Mustang never came through our doors. I was just being cautious on the phone. If it had, I would help you, I promise." Disappointed but not deterred, I expanded my search to private car collectors. I consulted with an old friend who was part of the classic car community in Portland. He suggested checking online forums and auction sites and put out the word among his contacts. By late afternoon, I had a possible lead. A collector named Walter had heard from another enthusiast about a 1967 Mustang being sold quickly at a steep discount, well below market value. Thomas had apparently sold the car for $25,000 when its actual value after my careful restoration was closer to $60,000. Walter directed me to a dealer who sometimes acted as a middleman for private sales. The dealer was reluctant to share information until I explained the full situation, including the personal items belonging to my late wife. Whether moved by my story or simply wanting to avoid potential legal issues with a car that might have been illegally sold, he gave me a name: Jack Morrison, a car collector who lived in Astoria, 2 hours from Portland. I thanked the dealer and immediately tried to find contact information for Jack Morrison. A quick internet search revealed several Jack Morrisons in Astoria, but none who seemed to be car collectors. I would have to go there in person. The problem was transportation. I had Eleanor's Subaru, but my arthritic knee was bothering me after a day of rushing around the city. The thought of a 2-hour drive each way was daunting. I called my neighbor and friend Frank, who had been a tremendous support since Eleanor's diagnosis. "Of course I will drive you," Frank said without hesitation when I explained the situation. "That son of yours." "Well, I will keep my opinions to myself. Pick you up tomorrow at 7? That night, I barely slept, thinking about the Mustang and what its glove box contained. I remembered countless road trips with Eleanor, how she would leave little notes for me to find in that glove box. For when you need coffee, attached to a few dollars. For when you need a kiss, with a chocolate Hershey's Kiss taped to the paper. For when you need courage, with a small photo of us together. The road trips had continued throughout our marriage, even after Thomas was born. We would pack up the Mustang and head out with no particular destination in mind, just the three of us exploring the Pacific Northwest. As Thomas grew older, he became less interested in these family adventures, preferring to stay with friends. Eleanor and I continued the tradition without him, discovering small coastal towns and mountain retreats, building memories that sustained me now in my loneliness. I remembered the day Thomas learned to drive in the Mustang. I had taken him to an empty parking lot, patient with his jerky starts and stops. He had been so proud when he finally mastered the clutch, his 16-year-old face breaking into a rare smile. Where had that boy gone? How had he become the man who would sell that very same car without a thought for what it meant to me? Morning came with gray skies threatening rain, typical Oregon weather even in early summer. Frank arrived promptly at 7, thermos of coffee in hand. "Figured we might need this," he said, pouring me a cup as I got into his comfortable sedan. "Now tell me everything you know about this Jack Morrison." During the 2-hour drive to Astoria, I filled Frank in on the details of my search. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or shaking his head. Frank had known Eleanor and me for 30 years, having moved in next door when Thomas was still in elementary school. He had witnessed our happy marriage, Eleanor's illness, and my grief. He understood what finding the Mustang meant to me. Astoria, when we arrived, was shrouded in a light fog rolling in from the Columbia River. The historic coastal town, with its Victorian homes perched on hills overlooking the water, had been a favorite weekend destination for Eleanor and me. "We stayed at a bed and breakfast here for our 35th anniversary," I told Frank as we drove through the familiar streets. Eleanor loved the views and the seafood. Frank squeezed my shoulder briefly. "We will find your car, Ramon, and those mementos." We stopped at a local coffee shop to ask about Jack Morrison. The barista did not recognize the name, but an elderly patron sitting near the window looked up with interest. Jack Morrison, the car fellow? Lives up on Crest Hill. Big house with a 3-car garage. Cannot miss it. Got a weather vane shaped like a Model T. Armed with these directions, we made our way up the winding roads of Crest Hill. The houses grew larger and more spaced apart as we climbed. Finally, we spotted it. A stately craftsman-style home with a large garage visible from the street. And there, on top of the garage, was a weather vane in the distinctive shape of a vintage car. As we pulled into the driveway, my heart nearly stopped. There, parked in front of the middle garage bay, was a candy apple red 1967 Ford Mustang. My Mustang. Eleanor's Mustang. Even from a distance, I recognized the custom chrome work I had painstakingly installed and the small ding on the passenger side door from when Thomas had accidentally opened it into a parking meter as a teenager. Frank stopped the car and looked at me. "Is that it?" I could only nod, my throat tight with emotion. After all my searching, there it was, the car that held my last connection to Eleanor. The car that contained her final message to me. "Let's go talk to Mr. Morrison," Frank said gently, turning off the engine. "Remember, stay calm. Most people are decent when they understand the situation." We approached the front door, and I took a deep breath before ringing the bell. The Mustang was so close now, and hopefully, Eleanor's last words to me were still inside. A tall man in his early 60s answered the door, wiping his hands on a rag that smelled of car polish. He had silver hair and the weathered face of someone who spent time outdoors. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, his tone friendly but cautious. "Are you Jack Morrison?" I asked. "I am. And you are?" "My name is Ramon Wells. I believe you recently purchased a 1967 Ford Mustang, the red one in your driveway." Jack's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something, perhaps wariness, crossing his features. "Yes, I did. Beautiful machine. Got it at a great price, too." "Are you a classic car enthusiast?" "Mr. Morrison," I said, my voice steady despite the emotions churning inside me. "That Mustang belonged to me. It was sold to you by my son without my permission." Jack's eyebrows shot up. "What?" "The young man who sold it to me said it belonged to his father who had passed away. Said his mother was selling it because she did not want the reminder around." My hands clenched at this new deception. Thomas had not only stolen my car but had invented a completely fictional scenario to sell it. "My wife passed away 6 months ago from cancer," I explained. "Not me. And my son had no right to sell the car. But I am not here to cause trouble or demand the car back. There were items in the glove box, personal items from my late wife. That is what I came for." Jack's expression softened with understanding. "I lost my wife 3 years ago," he said quietly. "I know what those personal items can mean." He gestured for us to follow him. "Come on out to the garage. Let's take a look." Frank gave my shoulder a supportive squeeze as we followed Jack around the side of the house to a large, detached garage. He pressed a button on a remote, and one of the doors slid upward to reveal a spacious, immaculately organized workspace. The Mustang sat in the center bay, gleaming under the overhead lights. Seeing it up close brought a flood of memories. Eleanor sitting in the passenger seat, her hair blowing in the wind from the open window. The picnic lunches we had shared on the hood at scenic viewpoints. Thomas, as a teenager, proudly polishing the chrome after I taught him how. "She's a beauty," Jack said, misinterpreting my silence. "Whoever restored her did excellent work." "That would be me," I said. "It took 5 years, working weekends. My wife kept me company in the garage. She would bring me sandwiches and beer." Jack nodded appreciatively. "My Catherine used to do the same when I was tinkering with my first Corvette." He unlocked the Mustang's door. "Let's check that glove box." My heart pounded as Jack leaned into the car and released the glove box latch. The small door dropped open, and he peered inside. "Empty," he said, looking back at me with confusion. "There is nothing in here." I moved forward quickly, needing to see for myself. Frank steadied my elbow as I leaned into the familiar interior of my car. The scent of the leather seats, the polish I always used on the dashboard, and the faintest trace of Eleanor's perfume enveloped me. But Jack was right. The glove box was completely empty. "That cannot be," I said, the desperation clear in my voice. "There was a gold locket, papers, a USB drive. They have to be here." Jack straightened, his expression troubled. "When I bought the car, I did a thorough inspection, but I never checked the glove box. It must have been emptied before I got it." "My son," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "Thomas must have taken the items. The young man who sold it to me did come back the next day," Jack said slowly. "Said he forgot something important. I was working from home that day and gave him access to the garage. He was alone with the car for maybe 10 minutes. I did not think anything of it at the time." The betrayal cut even deeper now. Thomas had not only sold the car without my permission, but had deliberately returned to remove the precious items from the glove box. Had he known all along what was there? Had he lied when he said he hadn't checked? "Mr. Wells," Jack said, placing a hand on my shoulder, "I think there has been a serious misunderstanding here. The paperwork I was shown indicated the seller had legal right to sell the vehicle. But given what you've told me, that appears not to be the case." He walked to a workbench along the wall and picked up a folder. "These are the documents I received with the purchase." He handed them to me, including the title transfer. I opened the folder with shaking hands. There was the title to the Mustang, originally in Eleanor's name, with a forged signature transferring ownership. There was also a bill of sale with what purported to be my signature, but was clearly Thomas's attempt at forgery. "This is not my signature," I said, showing the documents to Frank. "And this title transfer, the signature here is supposed to be my late wife's, but she has been gone for 6 months." Jack's expression hardened. "I do not appreciate being made party to fraud, Mr. Wells." He took a deep breath and seemed to come to a decision. "I paid $25,000 for this car, which I now realize is well below its market value. I will return the car to you for exactly what I paid. Not a penny more, not a penny less." I stared at him in shock. "You would do that?" Jack nodded. "I collect these cars because I love them and their history. Each one has a story. This one is clearly part of your story with your wife. It belongs with you." He paused. "Besides, I do not want a vehicle with a questionable title. Too many legal headaches." Relief and gratitude washed over me. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison, but I do not have $25,000 with me today." "We can work something out," Jack said. "A payment plan, perhaps, or you can arrange a bank transfer once you get home. I trust you." One widower to another. He twirled the Mustang's keys around his finger, then held them out to me. "Take your car home today. Get a cashier's check to me when you can." I took the keys, their familiar weight in my palm both comforting and painful. "I do not know how to thank you." "No thanks necessary," Jack said. "Just find those mementos from your wife. Those are the truly irreplaceable things." He gave me a knowing look. "And maybe have a serious conversation with your son." Frank drove behind me as I followed the familiar curves of Highway 101 back toward Portland, the Mustang responding to my touch just as it always had. The glove box remained empty, a painful reminder of Thomas's deeper betrayal. He had not just taken my car, he had taken Eleanor's final message to me and the other precious items she had left behind. The anger I had felt earlier transformed into something colder and more resolute. It was time to confront Thomas directly. Not just about the car, which I had now recovered, but about the stolen mementos that meant more to me than any vehicle ever could. As the coastline gave way to forest and then the outskirts of Portland, I rehearsed what I would say to my son. How could I make him understand the magnitude of what he had done? And more importantly, how could I get back the irreplaceable items that connected me to Eleanor? Thomas lived in a luxury apartment building in downtown Portland, the kind with a doorman and valet parking. His rent alone was more than my monthly mortgage payment, a fact that had always puzzled me given his inconsistent employment history. Now, understanding his gambling problem better, I wondered how many months he was behind, how desperate his financial situation might be. I parked the Mustang directly in front of the building entrance, A deliberate choice I knew would surprise Thomas if he happened to look out his window. Frank had offered to come with me, but this confrontation needed to be between father and son. The doorman recognized me from previous visits and nodded me through to the elevator. My heart pounded as I rode up to the 12th floor, rehearsing what I would say. I was angry, yes, but I also needed to be strategic. Thomas had something precious of mine, and getting it back was my priority. I knocked firmly on apartment 1221. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Finally, I heard movement inside, and the door swung open to reveal Thomas in sweatpants and a wrinkled t-shirt, looking like he had just woken up despite it being mid-afternoon. His expression when he saw me was priceless. First confusion, then shock, followed quickly by wariness. "Dad, what are you doing here?" His eyes narrowed. "How did you find the buyer?" "Hello, Thomas," I said calmly, pushing past him into the apartment. "We need to talk." The apartment was in disarray, unusual for Thomas, who had always been particular about appearances. Takeout containers littered the coffee table, mail was scattered across the kitchen counter, and an overflowing ashtray suggested a recently acquired smoking habit. "Nice place," I said, taking in the expensive furnishings amid the chaos. "Business must be good." Thomas closed the door, his posture defensive. "Look, if this is about the car, I told you it was for the best. You were not driving it anyway." "Actually, I drove it here today," I replied, enjoying the way his eyes widened. "Parked it right out front if you want to look." "Mr. Morrison was very understanding when I explained that my son had sold it without my permission using forged documents." The color drained from Thomas's face. "You got it back?" "How?" "I bought it back, Thomas, with my own money. Money I had been saving for retirement. Mr. Morrison was decent enough to sell it back to me for exactly what he paid, though we both know it is worth more than twice that amount." Thomas swallowed hard, then attempted to regain his composure with a dismissive wave. "Well, good for you. Glad it worked out. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a meeting to prepare for." "Sit down," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "We are not done." Something in my tone must have registered because Thomas sank onto the couch without further protest. "Where are the items that were in the glove box?" I asked directly. "What items?" he responded, but his eyes slid away from mine. "Do not play games, Thomas. Jack Morrison told me you went back the day after selling him the car, claiming you had forgotten something. You took the contents of the glove box. I want them back." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I do not know what you are talking about. There were just some old papers in there. Nothing important." "Those old papers included the last note your mother ever wrote to me," I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts. "And documentation for her family jewelry and videos she made before she died. Things that are irreplaceable." A flicker of something, perhaps shame, crossed Thomas's face before he masked it. "I did not see anything like that." I moved to stand directly in front of him. "Stop lying to me. You have been lying since the moment you called to tell me you sold my car. You lied to Jack Morrison about who owned the car. You forged documents. You stole from me while I was grieving your mother. And now you are lying about the glove box contents." Thomas stood suddenly, agitated. "What was I supposed to do, Dad? Just ask for money again? You made it clear you were done enabling me." He made air quotes around the word. "I needed that money. You have no idea what kind of pressure I am under." "So you stole from me instead," I said flatly. "I borrowed," Thomas shouted. "I was going to pay you back once my new business took off. It is a sure thing this time." I sighed, suddenly feeling every one of my 67 years. "There is no business, is there, Thomas? There's just gambling debts." The accuracy of my statement seemed to deflate him. He sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands. "How did you know?" "Your mother suspected toward the end," I said, taking a seat in the armchair across from him. "She noticed patterns in your requests for money. Always urgent, always a specific amount. She made me promise to help you, but not in the way you wanted." Thomas looked up, his eyes red. "What does that mean?" "It means I will not give you money to gamble away anymore. But I will help you get treatment. Real help." He scoffed. "I do not need treatment. I need capital. This next opportunity is guaranteed. I just need to get in on the ground floor." I shook my head. "No more opportunities, Thomas. No more investments. No more bailouts." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folder Jack had given me, laying the forged documents on the coffee table. "What you did was not just immoral, it was illegal. Forgery, fraud, theft. I have copies of these, by the way. The originals are in my safe deposit box." Thomas stared at the documents, the reality of his situation clearly dawning on him. "Here is what is going to happen," I continued, my voice calm but firm. "You are going to return every item that was in that glove box. Then you are going to enter a treatment program for your gambling addiction. I will help with that, pay for it if necessary. You will also agree to financial transparency with me until you have demonstrated responsibility." "And if I refuse?" Thomas challenged, a last flicker of defiance. "Then I take these documents to the police," I said simply. "I do not want to do that, Thomas. You are my son, and I love you. But I cannot continue to enable behavior that hurts both of us." The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of complicated emotions. Finally, Thomas stood and walked to his bedroom without a word. He returned moments later with a small box, which he placed on the coffee table. "This is everything," he said quietly. "I did not sell any of it, if that is what you are worried about." I opened the box with trembling hands. Inside was Eleanor's gold locket, still on its delicate chain. The USB drive was there too, along with the folder of jewelry documentation. Relief flooded through me at the sight of these treasures. "The car title was in there too," I said, looking up at Thomas. He nodded. "I used it for the sale. It is with the new owner, it was with him." He paused. "How did you get the car back without the title?" "Jack Morrison is a decent man who recognized a wrong when he saw it," I replied, unlike my son. Thomas flinched at that, then sat down heavily. "I needed the money, Dad. I owe some people. Dangerous people. They are not patient about repayment." For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes, and it softened my anger slightly. "How much?" "42,000, he admitted. "Plus interest that keeps growing." I nodded, absorbing this information. "I will help you with this debt, Thomas. One last time. But only if you agree to my conditions. Treatment, transparency, and you work to earn back my trust." The negotiation that followed was long and at times heated. Thomas initially balked at the strictness of my conditions, particularly the requirement for therapy and financial oversight. But as the afternoon wore into evening, the reality of his situation seemed to fully register. "I sold your car," he said finally, his voice small. "Mom's car. I knew what it meant to you both, and I sold it anyway." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "What kind of son does that?" "The kind who needs help," I answered honestly. "The kind whose father has not always set the right boundaries. We both have work to do, Thomas." By the time I left, we had an agreement. I would help with his gambling debts in exchange for his immediate enrollment in a treatment program and ongoing financial transparency. It was not forgiveness, not yet. That would take time and evidence of real change. But it was a start, a path forward that honored Eleanor's last wish that I help our son become the man she knew he could be. As I drove the Mustang home through the darkening streets of Portland, the small box of treasures secure on the passenger seat, I felt Eleanor's presence more strongly than I had since her death. The car that had been our sanctuary was back where it belonged, and in my pocket was the locket containing her final message to me, still unopened, waiting for when I was ready. That night, after returning home with the Mustang safely back in the garage and Eleanor's precious mementos recovered, I sat in our bedroom holding the gold locket. For 6 months, I had not been ready to read her final message to me. The grief had been too raw, too overwhelming. But now, having nearly lost this connection to her forever, I felt a different kind of readiness. I carefully opened the locket, looking first at our wedding photo, both of us so young and full of hope. Then, with trembling fingers, I opened the tiny compartment on the opposite side and removed a tightly folded piece of paper. Eleanor's handwriting, once so bold and artistic, had become shakier during her illness, but it was unmistakably hers. "My beloved Ramon," the note began. "If you are reading this, I am gone, but my love for you remains. 40 years was not enough. 100 years would not have been enough. But I am grateful for every moment we shared. I have one final request, my love. Forgive Thomas, not for his sake but for yours. Carrying anger will only burden your heart, and I want your heart to be light enough to find joy again. He is flawed, as we all are, but he is also capable of growth. Set firm boundaries, but leave the door open for him to become the man I know he can be. Find happiness again, Ramon. Travel, make new friends, perhaps even love again, though I know you think that impossible now. Live fully enough for both of us. That is how you will honor what we shared. All my love, through this life, and whatever comes after, Eleanor." Tears flowed freely as I read her words. Eleanor, even in her final message, had known exactly what I would need to hear. She had anticipated the conflict with Thomas and had given me permission to set boundaries while maintaining hope for reconciliation. How had she known? The next morning, I called Thomas and confirmed he had contacted the treatment center we had discussed. He sounded tired but resolved, perhaps truly ready for change for the first time. I arranged for the payment of his gambling debts, making it clear this was the final financial assistance he would receive from me unless it was for education or treatment. The following weeks brought gradual changes. Thomas entered a 30-day inpatient program for gambling addiction. I visited him weekly, our conversations awkward at first but slowly becoming more honest. He shared details of how his gambling had started in college with poker games, escalating over the years until it controlled his life. I shared more about my relationship with Eleanor, stories he had never heard or had forgotten, helping him understand what the car and its contents had meant to us. "She left videos for you too," I told him during one visit. "Messages she recorded when she knew she would not be here for important moments in your life." Thomas's eyes had filled with tears. "I do not deserve them." "Maybe not yet," I had replied honestly. "But she made them because she believed you would become someone who did." 3 months after our confrontation, Thomas completed the intensive phase of his treatment program and moved into a more affordable apartment. As part of our agreement, he took a steady job at a friend's construction company rather than pursuing another high-risk business venture. It was humble work for someone with his education, but it provided structure and stability he desperately needed. I had consulted with a lawyer about Eleanor's jewelry documentation that Thomas had taken from the glove box. Some of the pieces had been sold before I could recover the paperwork, but with the documentation now back in my possession, we were able to track down and reclaim several family heirlooms through legal channels. As for me, I slowly began to heal. I joined a grief support group for seniors who had lost spouses, finding comfort in sharing stories with others who understood the unique pain of losing a life partner after decades together. I returned to work full-time, finding purpose in completing projects Eleanor had known were important to me. The Mustang remained in my garage, but now I drove it regularly, sometimes just around Portland, other times on longer journeys to places Eleanor and I had loved. I kept her locket in the glove box again, but now I read her note often, drawing strength from her words when the grief threatened to overwhelm me. 6 months after recovering the car, Thomas and I took our first step toward rebuilding our relationship beyond the structured visits and financial oversight. He asked if I would teach him more about car maintenance, something he had shown little interest in as a teenager. We spent a Saturday in the garage, my hands guiding his through an oil change on the Mustang, both of us aware of Eleanor's absence but also feeling her presence in the shared activity she would have loved to see. "I miss her," Thomas said unexpectedly as we worked. I did not let myself feel it before. It was easier to chase the next bet, the next high, than to face the fact that she was gone. "I know," I replied, handing him a wrench. "Grief finds us all eventually, one way or another. Better to face it head-on than let it distort you." Thomas nodded, understanding passing between us. The road ahead would not be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time and consistent effort to rebuild. But Eleanor had been right, as she so often was. Thomas was capable of growth, and I was capable of setting boundaries with love rather than anger. As summer turned to fall, I found myself reflecting on all that had happened since Eleanor's death, the profound grief that had nearly consumed me, the betrayal by my son that had forced me to find strength I did not know I possessed, the recovery of precious mementos that connected me to Eleanor, and most importantly, the beginnings of healing for both Thomas and myself. Loss reveals people's true character. In Thomas's case, it had initially brought out desperation and selfishness. In mine, perhaps too much passivity and avoidance. But loss also offers opportunities for redemption and growth. Thomas was slowly becoming more responsible and honest. I was learning to live fully again, honoring Eleanor's final wish. The Mustang, once just a restoration project, had become something more. A repository of memories, yes, but also a symbol of resilience. Like the car, my relationship with Thomas had been damaged but not beyond repair. With time, patience, and the right tools, both could be restored to something that, while not exactly the same as before, could still function and even thrive. Eleanor's wisdom continues to guide me through grief and family challenges. Set boundaries with love, not anger. Leave room for growth and change. Find joy again, even in the midst of loss. These lessons, delivered in her final message to me, have become my roadmap for moving forward. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you love? Did you find a way to balance accountability with compassion? Please share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, consider giving it a like and subscribing to hear more life lessons from someone who has weathered his share of storms. Thank you for listening to my story today, and may you find the wisdom to navigate your own challenging relationships with both strength and kindness.